Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is the Nedarim Daf 90, Nedarim Tzadi. Now we're going to start on 89b at the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says that if a woman says, Konem she'eni nene la'abo avicha, she says, I take a vow that I'm not going to benefit from my father or your father. Im osani alpicha, if I benefit you, so she makes it conditional. If I benefit you, then I will not be able to benefit from my father or your father. Or she says, she'eni nenes lacha, or she says, I'm not going to be able to benefit from you if I benefit my father or your father. According to our Mishnah, the husband can reject the vow, meaning say, the way the Gemara is going to explain it, even though the vow doesn't take effect yet, it's a conditional vow. So he's rejecting the vow, even though it's just conditional. So that is still going to be allowed. So the Gemara says, well, this is actually a dispute that Tanya, we learned, where let's say she says, according to the Bride, that she says, I'm not going to be able to benefit from my father or your father if I give you any benefit. I won't be able to benefit from my father or your father. Rabbi Nassan says he cannot reject the vow because since it's a conditional vow, if he's not rejecting anything, the condition hasn't taken place yet. So therefore, he can't reject the vow in advance. Whereas the Chachamim say he can't reject it. So basically, our Mishnah seems to be arguing with Rabbi Nassan. The Chachamim say he can reject the vow in advance if it's a conditional vow. Rabbi Nassan says he cannot. The Chachamim, the next case is Netuanim Yehudim Imisham. She says, I'm not going to be able to have intercourse with any other Jew if I will have relations with you. So again, it's a conditional vow. The vow has not taken effect yet. Rabbi Nassan says, Rabbi Nassan says the husband cannot reject the vow in advance. Chachamim says he can reject the vow in advance. So we see from here that this is the dispute between Chachamim and Rabbi Nassan. Rabbi Nassan says he cannot reject the vow in advance. And Chachamim say he can. So then the Gemara tells us a story. There was a man who prohibited all the benefits of the world upon himself. He said, I'm going to benefit from all the benefits of the world. He says, if I end up marrying a woman prior to studying Hilchasa, what does it mean to study the Hilchasa? So the Ran says he wanted to study Torah before he married a woman so that he would not lose the Shalispata Machmasa. So he wouldn't lose the ability to study Torah, because we say in the Gemara in Kedushin, if you have a mill around your neck, how are you going to study Torah? So you need to study Torah before he got married. And so he was running around with a string and with a stick, and basically a stick in his bag, meaning to say that Ran says he was striving with all his heart to study Torah, but he wasn't able. He wasn't successful in studying Torah. Not everybody is successful in studying Torah. So now he has a problem. He can't get married until he studies Torah, but he can't study the whole Torah. He's just not successful at it yet. So what does it mean to study Torah? So most say it means that he said he's going to finish Shas, not the Talmud, because obviously the Talmud is not written yet. So it means that the Shisha Sidrei Mishnayos. Also, Rav Acha Bar Avuna did him a favor. He said Vishabashay, and he tricked him. He said, "You're allowed to get married." The Insav Isasa. He tricked him to say you won't be prohibited, and he tricked him into saying he could get married, because he knew he couldn't annul the vow in advance. So we should say that there's a distinction between our Mishnah was talking about rejecting a vow in advance. Rabbi Nassan says you can't do it, but here we're talking about, and the Chum say you can. But here we're saying about annulling a vow in advance. So he knew that he was choishesh for the position of Rabbi Nassan. Not only that you can't reject the vow in advance, but you also can't annul a vow in advance. And so therefore he tricked him into getting married. He said, oh, and now you're prohibited from everybody in the world. So what are you going to do? Under those circumstances, what did he do? Visharke Tina, and he put mud upon him. Why did he put the mud upon him? So there's many different explanations about why he put the mud upon him. Tosfos says he doesn't want him to get any benefit from the world, so he covered him in mud. Or some say that he didn't want Rav Chisda, says Tosfos, to recognize him because he was embarrassed that he didn't keep his vow. The Ran says no. The explanation is so he wanted to show him that he needed to go to that he needed help immediately. He needed people. He needed to go to get some to get his clothes laundered. The Rush says he had removed all of his clothes because he wasn't allowed to get benefit from the world, and so therefore he put mud on him to cover it up. And so therefore he went to Rav Chisda. To annul his vow. Also, coming to Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Man Chacham U'Miyaved G'Amil Sa'ilad Rav Acha Bar Afuna. The Gavar Rabbi, he says, oh, Rav Acha Bar Afuna is a great man. Look what he did here. He's such a great man. Why? Because the Kasavar, because Rav Acha Bar Afuna is in a position. The Kieche the Pligi Rabbanim Rav Nassan Ba'afara, just like they argue. Rav Nassan says the husband can't reject the vow in advance. He says this is the same thing with respect to Hatar, with respect to the Chachamim or the Bezin rejecting a vow, they also can't do it in advance. So therefore, we see that one position is the Rav Nassan says you can't reject the vow in advance. Chachamim say you can, but that's only by rejecting. But Rav Acha Bar Afuna is saying that not only do they argue by rejecting a vow in advance, they also argue by annulling a vow in advance. Rav Papi says no, machokas ba'afara. They only argue by rejecting a vow in advance. There are Nazan Savarena Baal Mefer Elam Ken Chal Neder. Rav Nazan says you can't reject the vow in advance because you can only reject the vow once the vow takes effect. Because it says v'chafra halavana, because the moon will be embarrassed. So what does that mean? V'chafra halavana, meaning to say that this is how Rav Papi understands what Rav Nassan is saying. He says the chafra comes from an expression of hafara, of rejection. And lavana is like baniyah, that once it's built, like bona bama, we said that anybody who makes a vow, it's like you're building a bama. So he says once the vow is built, it can be rejected. The Rabbanan savri baal mefer afapi shel chal neder, but the Rabbanan say no, the husband can reject the vow even though the vow has not taken effect yet, because mefer machshavos arumim, even though it's just a machshava, even though it's just a thought, you can reject the bad thoughts in advance. Aval b'sheila, says Rav Papi, he argues with Rav Acha Bar Afuna, he says by sheila divrei hakohen chacham mater, even kulam elam kein chal neder. He says even the chachamim would say under that position that they cannot reject it in advance. Even the chachamim would say you can't reject it in advance. Because he says the chachamim would say you can't matter anything unless the vow takes effect. Because it says lo yachel dvaro. Only once its words take effect can it be annulled. So we've seen explicitly two different explanations. They're opposite. Rabbi Nassan says Rav Acha Bar Afuna says that Rabbi Nassan says is din that you can't reject it in advance by hafara and also by hatar, by rejection and also by annulling. But it seems that Rav Chisda is saying no, that they're only that he said well, it was a chiddush because everybody assumed that they were only arguing by hafara, that Rabbi Nassan only says it's din by hafara but not by hafara. And then Rav Papi comes along and says not only does Rav Nassan say it's din by hatara that you can't annul in advance, but the Chachamim would also agree by Hatara that you can't annul in advance because it says, because it says, Lo yachel devaro. Lo yachel is devaro, meaning to say that the law of Hatar Nedarim only applies when the Neder takes effect in the first place. So the Gemara says, Lema Misayele. Let's bring a support to the position of Rav Papa that the Chachamim only say their din when the vow is annulled in advance. The Chachamim say that you can't annul it in advance that even the Chum say you can't annul in advance. Because if a person says, Konem Shani Nana Aponi, well, Misha Ashalav, somebody makes a vow, he says, I'm not going to benefit, Reuben says, I'm not going to benefit from Shimon, and also I won't benefit from the person who annuls that vow, because he's trying to prevent himself from getting the vow annulled. That's how, for Brengti, that's how much he is in an uproar. So Nishal al Rishon, V'achach Nishal al Sheni. First, you annul the first vow that he can't benefit, and once that is annulled, then you annul the second one that he can't benefit from the person who annulled the vow. And this is support for Rav Papi, because if you want to say you can annul the vow even though the vow doesn't take effect, you should be able to annul both. You should have the option, whichever one he wants to annul first. The Gemara says, no, that's not a proof. When he says, I want to know the first one or the second one, you don't know which one he was referring to. He could have been referring to, when it said, it just means which one he didn't know first, not that he has to annul the first vow first. So it's not a proof. So the Gemara says, let's bring a different proof for our puppy. Layman Messiah. Person says, I'm not going to benefit from so-and-so. And when I know his vow, I'll be a Nazarite. Nishal Nidra, Varchach Nishal Nidra. Gemara says that he has to annul his vow, and then after he annuls his vow, he has to annul only the Nazarite vow. So we see he can't annul the Nazarite vow in advance. If we want to say, like Rav Chizda, Rav Acha bar Rafuna wanted to say that you can annul the vow in advance, according to Chachamim, even though the vow isn't taken in effect. So we see that this Bryce is saying you would have been able to annul it for either one first, and the fact that you can't do it, it shows that the author of the Bryce is saying you can't annul the vow in advance. So isn't this a proof for a pop? And Gemara says, no, why do you have to assume that this Bryce is like Chachamim? We could say that this Bryce is Rabbi Nasani, that this Bryce is Rabbi Nasan, but according to Rav Acha bar Rafuna, who says that even Rabbi Nasan says you can't annul a vow in advance, but the Chachamim would say you could annul the vow in advance, just like you could be made for a vow in advance. So Amar Ravina, Amar Li Maremer, Acha Amar Avuch Mishmeid Rav Papa, a third opinion. So far we've seen the opinion of Rav Acha bar Rafuna, who says that Rabbi Nasan says you cannot reject a vow in advance and you cannot annul a vow in advance, but the Chachamim say you can do it for both. And then we've seen the law of Rav Papi that says that the Chachamim argue with Rabbi Nassim about rejecting a vow in advance. If they say you can't, but when it comes to annulling a vow in advance, the Chachamim say you can reject a vow in advance, but when it comes to annulling, they agree with Rabbi Nassim. You cannot annul a vow in advance. But now we see a third approach that says Ravina that not only is there a dispute by Afara, there's only a dispute by Afara that Rabbi Nassim says you can't reject a vow in advance, and some say you can. But when it comes to annulling a vow in advance, that he argues with Rav Papi, the first version of Rav Papi, and he argues with Rav Acha bar Rafuna, who says that Rabbi Nassim says you can't annul a vow in advance. He says, no, Rabbi Nassim agrees with the Chachamim that you cannot annul a vow in advance. Because he says, what does that mean? Means say that you can annul a vow even before it takes place, even though it's just words. It means to say, even though there was no action done, you could, even though it was just words, you could annul the vow. So now the Gemara is going to challenge this. So basically, according to this version of Rav Papi, Rabbi Nassan is also saying you can annul a vow in advance. You just can't reject a vow in advance. So the Gemara challenged this because we say Konem Sheni Nanel Aponi Misha Nishalav Nishal Rishon V'Akaf Nishal Sheni. That first you have to annul the first one and then you annul the second one. But it's a question on this approach of if you're saying Rabbi Nassan says you can annul the vow in advance, why do you have to first annul the first one and only the second one? The exact same answer. Of course, this time I've been a question on Rabbi Nassim. Says no, we didn't know which one was first. Well, then the Gemara gives a second question on Ravina's approach to Rav Papi. It says Meitzvei Konam Sheni Nenav Hareini Nazir Kashashalav. nishal al nidra v'achaf nishal al nidra. If a person says, I take a vow, I can't benefit from, let's say, Shimon, and then he says, and whoever annuls the vow, I'll be when whoever makes the vow, I'll be a Nazarite. So first you annul the vow that you made about Shimon, and then you annul the vow that you made about Nazarite. And if Rabbi Nassan is correct that you could annul a vow in advance, so therefore, the Gemara says to Yufta, because now you can't answer, well, this price is according to you can't say this price is just going according to the Chachamim, because that's also going to be a question on Ravina, because the first Rav Papi said that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Nassan that you cannot annul it in advance. So you could there say, well, that price you could have defended by saying, no, that's the position of Rabbi Nassan. But according to the position that says that even Rabbi Nassan agrees that the vow can be annulled in advance, then there is no position that says that the vow cannot be annulled in advance. But here we're saying clearly the vow cannot be annulled in advance. So anyway, to summarize, we have three approaches. We have the approach of Rav Acha bar Rav Huna, who says that Rabbi Nassan says not only the Chachamim say you can annul, you can reject the vow in advance, but Rabbi Nassan says, according to this approach of Rav Acha bar Rav Huna, that Rabbi Nassan says not only can you not reject the vow in advance, you cannot annul a vow in advance, and that's why he put the mud on the he tricked the person. He put the mud on him in advance so that they could, because he couldn't annul the vow in advance. Then we have the first approach of Rav Papi, who says that the Chachamim say you're not allowed to, that you're allowed to reject the vow in advance, but the Chachamim would agree with Rabbi Nassan that you cannot annul a vow in advance. And now we have the third approach, which the Gemara rejected, which is that Rabbi Nassan agrees with the Chachamim that you cannot annul, that you can annul a vow in advance. He just argues about rejecting a vow that Rabbi Nassan says you cannot reject a vow in advance. But that third approach was refuted because we see there clearly is a brisa that says you cannot annul a vow in advance. Okay, so now we go to the text of the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, the last Mishnah in Maseches Nedarim. The Mishnah tells us, a very powerful Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us, Barishona ayu omrim shalosh nashim yotzos v'notos ksuva. First, there are three women. The first Mishnah, we're going to reject this, but at first there are three women who we said they leave the marriage and they take their ksuba. If they make such a claim, they leave their marriage and they take their ksuba. Who are these three women? Omer is Tamei ani lecha. She says, I am Tamei to you. The Gemara is going to explain. This scenario is clearly talking about, a woman who was married to a Kohen, and so therefore, since she was married to the Kohen, if she's assaulted, Rahman al against her will, the Kohen has to divorce her, because the Kohen is considered to be such a kedusha that if he's married to a woman who was assaulted, he has to divorce her. But so she takes her ksuva. So if she says, I was assaulted, we believe her, and she takes her marital payment. The second case is where she says, Shemayim beini u'beinecha. She says, the heaven is between me and you. What does that mean when she says the heaven is between me and you? The Gemara assumes that she's talking about that he's basically unable to father children. And so therefore, she's allowed to come at him with this claim and say, if I stay married to you, I'm not going to that I'm not going to be able to have a child. And what's the reason why she's entitled to have a child? She's not obligated in Pura Revu. The reason why she's able to have a child, why she's able to make such a claim, is because she says, like we said in the Gemara in Ksubos, that she says that she's entitled to have somebody who could care for her while she gets older. And then the third, and there is nobody else who can determine whether or not that's true. Today we have doctors who could determine such a claim. In those days, we had no doctor, so we would have to accept her claim. And the third approach is where she says, Natul anim and Yehudim. She says she takes an oath that she's not allowed to be with any man. And the assumption is that the only reason why she took this oath is because the tashmish, the intercourse is painful for her. and so therefore she's entitled to her ksuba, and she can leave the marriage. But then the rabbis changed their mind, and we have a Mishnah Achrona. Basically, the rabbis changed their mind and said, the rabbis were concerned that maybe she's going to be putting her eyes on a different man, and so therefore and so as a consequence of this, the rabbis didn't want her to use this as an excuse, and and she would basically be able to use this as a way of committing adultery and then leaving the relationship. And so therefore, so therefore, if the woman says, listen, I was assaulted, she has to bring a proof that indeed she was assaulted. How is she going to bring a proof? She would have to bring this proof that she was assaulted. And so therefore, there's a big problem with this, because me'ikar adin, such a woman, if she was assaulted, she said that this is prohibited, that her husband is prohibited upon her. So how are the rabbis going to allow this biblical prohibition? So we could say that any woman who says to Me'ani Ucha, the Chachamim uprooted the Kedushin, because we say Kol Mekadesh Adat the Rabbanan, like we said in Yevamos and in Ksubos. And so therefore, when she was assaulted, maybe she wasn't married to the Kohen. That's what the Ran says. The Ran gives other explanations. But so therefore, we're going to uproot it, and she'll be able to remain married. So nowadays, also, I heard that this is a big leniency that if in this circumstance, they could say, even if a woman claims she was assaulted today and she doesn't want to leave the marriage, we say, well, we don't believe you. And based upon our Mishnah here, that she's allowed to remain married to the Kohen. So then the second case was if she says, Hashemayim bini u'beinecha, she says, listen, my husband's not able to produce children, Yasu derech bakasha. So what does that mean, Yasu derech bakasha? Some say it means that we convince her not to make this claim anymore. Some say it means that we pray to God, and some say we tell the husband to give her a nice meal and to try and basically repair the marriage. And the third approach is where the third situation says, she says, I am prohibited to be, she takes a vow she's not going to have intercourse anymore. Then we say, then we say, let him annul the part of it as it relates to him. And then she can continue to have intercourse with him. And then she's just prohibited to be from everybody else. What about the fact that she's in pain? So I guess if she would actually bring proof, maybe that would be a different story, but he's allowed to annul the vow as it relates to him. So the Gemara asks the question, she says to her husband, to Me'ani, I was assaulted. Now, originally we would believe her and she would take her ksuba, but now we no longer believe her. And so she stays in the marriage. But the question is, is she allowed to eat the truma? Normally she's married to a Kohen, she could eat the truma. In this case, do we say we don't believe her with respect to the marriage, but we do believe her so that she can't eat the truma? She says she can continue to eat the truma. Why? Because otherwise people are going to say, oh, her children are not really Kohanim. And it would start all sorts of rumors about the children. Rabba says, she does not eat the truma because she doesn't have to eat truma, she can eat the chulin. Amar Rava Moder Rav Sheshes Shem Nisarmala She'ino Chalas. Rav Sheshes admits that if she became a widow after the fact, then she can no longer eat the truma. Why? Because the whole reason why she can eat truma is just because we're concerned that the rumors will start swirling about her children. But Nisarmala and Niskarsha, if she became widowed or divorced, we could say, that maybe she was assaulted after she became widowed or divorced, and that's the reason why she's stopping to eat the truma. And so therefore, it's not going to be motzi laz. It's not starting rumors about her children.